There are moments that change your entire life in a single heartbeat. Sometimes they happen between old wooden shelves in a quiet college library, when a sunbeam catches in someone's hair, and your world simply stops. Ethan lifted his head from his drafting board and noticed a girl standing by the section on economics, frowning over an open notebook. Early March sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the University of Colorado Library, turning her loose chestnut bun into a small golden halo. A few strands slipped down her cheek each time she leaned toward the book. "Excuse me," he said softly as he approached. "You're not from the economics department, are you? Need a hand?" She turned, and something inside Ethan flipped over. Her gray eyes held a hint of caution, but also a spark of interest. "Valerie," she introduced herself, passing him her notes. "I just can't figure out these projections. We got a quiz tomorrow, and I'm totally lost." Ethan, architecture major, he smiled and bent over her notebook. "Oh, this is simple. Look." He grabbed a pencil and began explaining. Their heads leaned closer. Valerie smelled like spring wind and light perfume, a scent that would haunt Ethan's dreams for years. "I get it now," she suddenly exclaimed. "How did I not see this earlier?" "Sometimes you just need a fresh pair of eyes," he replied, unable to look away from her face. Maybe we could grab coffee after class? I can show you a couple more tricks." Spring of 1992 burst into their lives bright and warm. Ethan took Valerie around downtown Boulder, pointing out architectural landmarks he knew by heart. She'd tilt her head back to study cornices and rooftops, and he couldn't tear his eyes away from the curve of her neck. "See these columns?" he said near the old Performing Arts Theater. "They look the same, but each one has its own personality." "Like people," Valerie whispered, and something in her tone made Ethan's heart pound harder. They walked for hours along the Riverside Trail, where young cottonwoods were just turning green. They talked about the future, dreams, careers, the life they imagined. Valerie wanted to work with numbers, to find structure in the chaos of economic data. Ethan dreamed of designing homes that made people feel at peace. "One day I'll build you a house," he told her one evening as they sat on a bench in the campus park, "with huge windows, so there's always plenty of light." "I'll only need you," she replied, and it sounded like a vow. By the end of the semester, they couldn't imagine life without each other. Ethan moved into Valerie's dorm, officially to her roommate's bed, though nobody believed that for a second. They studied for finals, shared one mug of tea, and dreamed of their first apartment after graduation. "Why do we need a piece of paper?" Valerie would say, lying on his shoulder. "A signature at City Hall doesn't make love stronger." Ethan kissed her hair and stayed silent. Deep down, he wanted her to be his wife, but he was afraid to break their fragile harmony. Everything changed one hot August day in 1993. When Colonel Gregory Summers, Valerie's father, showed up in their dorm hallway. Valerie went pale as soon as she saw him, a retired military officer. He stood tall and stern in his formal uniform, medals glinting on his chest. His eyes swept the room, stopping on Ethan's shirt thrown over a chair. "Dad," Valerie began, but he raised his hand. "I will not allow my daughter to live in an unregistered relationship," he said sharply. "This is disgraceful. You either get married or I'm taking Valerie home. Permanently." Ethan stood up, trying to remain respectful. "Sir, we love each other." "Love is responsibility, young man." The colonel cut him off. "Not a game. My daughter is not some passerby you picked up." Valerie sobbed quietly, covering her face with her hands. Ethan understood there was no choice, either a wedding or losing her forever. The ceremony was small in October. Valerie looked beautiful in a simple white dress they bought with their last dollars. As Ethan slid the ring onto her trembling finger, he felt a strange mix of joy and bitterness. Joy that she was now his wife. Bitterness that the decision had been forced. "You're mine forever now," he whispered after they signed the papers. "Wasn't I before?" she answered softly, but her voice held a shadow of sadness. Colonel Summers shook Ethan's hand firmly. "Take care of her. Valerie is my only daughter." The young couple hugged on the courthouse steps. To the world, they looked like two people starting a long, happy life together. But deep inside, both felt something had shifted. Their freedom had been taken. And now they had to learn to love each other not only with passion, but with duty. Time moved forward, bringing challenges that would test their love. Their decisions that split life into before and after, and the most devastating ones are made quietly, in the stillness of a small kitchen, over a cup of cold tea, on an ordinary spring morning, when your entire world collapses inside you. June 1994. Soft sunlight filled the tiny room of the old shared house they rented after college. Valerie sat on the edge of the bed, holding a white pregnancy test strip, silent. Ethan froze in the doorway, his architecture degree still under his arm. He had just returned from his thesis defense, full of joy, plans, and pride. "Valerie, what happened?" He sat beside her, noticing how pale she was. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. Ethan's heart plummeted, then soared. "A baby? Our baby? That's amazing." He tried to hug her, but she pulled away, and something in her movements made his joy flicker out. "No, Ethan, it's not happening." "What do you mean?" He didn't understand. Or maybe he didn't want to. "I'm ending the pregnancy next week." Valerie stood and walked to the window, her back to him. "We don't have the money. We don't have stable jobs. I haven't finished my degree. This isn't the right time." Not the right time? Ethan felt something inside him freeze. "Valerie, this is our child. Our blood. It's a cluster of cells," she replied coldly. "And I'm not sacrificing my future for it." They argued until late at night. Ethan spoke of life, of miracles, of the idea that love could help them overcome anything. Valerie responded with numbers. How much formula cost, diapers, doctor visits. Every dollar counted. She was immovable. "We love each other," he whispered, kissing her hands. "Don't you want a baby with me?" "I do," she said after a long silence. "But not now. Not like this." On Thursday, Valerie went to the clinic alone. Ethan offered to come, but she refused. "This is my decision. I'll handle it myself." He spent the whole day at work in the architectural firm that had just hired him, unable to focus on a single drawing. Lines blurred, and the same question echoed in his mind. Why? Valerie returned in the evening, pale, empty-eyed. She lay on the bed, turning to the wall. "How are you?" he asked gently. "Fine," she replied flatly. "I'm defending my thesis tomorrow." When he tried to hug her, she tensed. "Don't. It hurts." Ethan withdrew his hand and lay beside her, staring at the ceiling. Between them, an invisible wall rose, cold, silent, impossible to break. The next day, Valerie defended her thesis with top marks and, a week later, landed a job as an accountant at a manufacturing plant in Denver. She worked from early morning till late evening, came home silent, and sat down with accounting manuals, studying new federal standards. Ethan watched his wife and could no longer recognize the girl he'd fallen in love with in that library years ago. She had become sharper, colder, focused entirely on her career. She no longer asked about his projects, never wondered how his day went. One Saturday, he found her standing by the kitchen window, unmoving, staring outside where children were playing near the sandbox. Tears silently streamed down her cheeks. "Val," he whispered. She turned abruptly, wiping her face. "What?" "Dinner's almost ready." "You were crying." "Just tired." Valerie turned back to the stove, but Ethan saw her shoulders trembling. He approached, wanted to pull her into his arms, to tell her he understood her pain, that it would be okay. But she stepped away again. "Don't, Ethan. Please." A month later, Ethan visited his mother. Mary Collins welcomed her son warmly, but quickly noticed a sadness in his eyes. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked, placing a cup of tea and homemade jam in front of him. He told her everything. The pregnancy, the procedure, the way Valerie had changed. Mary listened quietly, sighing only occasionally. "Son," she finally said softly, "a woman has a right to choose, but you have a right to honesty. If there's no trust between you, if she can't share her pain with you, that's not good. What should I do, Mom?" "Give her time. And remember, she's hurting too, just differently than you." Ethan returned home determined to fix things. He bought flowers, cooked dinner, waited for Valerie to come back from work. "Val, we need to talk," he said when she walked in and headed straight for her paperwork. "About what?" Her voice was tired, flat. "About us. About what's happening." "Nothing is happening," she replied, but her eyes flickered with pain. "We're working, living, building a future. And love? Were we in all this, Val?" She looked at him for a long moment, and in her gaze he saw such deep sorrow that his chest tightened. "Love didn't go anywhere," she whispered. I can't be who I was. Not right now. Give me time." But time passed, and the wall between them only grew stronger. Valerie climbed the career ladder, earning a promotion to senior accountant. Ethan worked on a large residential complex project. They lived in the same home, slept in the same bed, but felt like strangers. In the evenings, Ethan sat at his drafting table designing houses with huge windows, children's bedrooms, warm family kitchens, and realized he wasn't drawing for clients. He was drawing the life they could have had. A quiet ache settled in his heart for that girl from the library, the one who looked at buildings with wonder, the one who once said, "I only need you." Where was she now? Would she ever come back? Sometimes two people can live side by side for years, yet slowly become strangers. Silence fills the space like fog, and even shared walls can't warm two cooling hearts. By 1998, Ethan and Valerie were the perfect couple, on paper. He was a rising architect, the mind behind Denver's Central Park renovation project that earned praise from the city. She was the chief accountant at Iron Forge Manufacturing, a woman even department heads respected and feared. They had a spacious 3-bedroom condo, a car, a cabin outside the city. They had everything, except happiness. "Maybe we should see a doctor," Ethan suggested one evening as Valerie typed another report at her desk. She looked up, and he saw exhaustion in her eyes. "What doctor?" "A fertility specialist. We've been trying for 2 years, and nothing." Valerie hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, make an appointment." The clinic smelled of bleach and unspoken grief. For the first time in months, they sat holding hands. Valerie was tense. Ethan tried to comfort her, but every word fell hollow. The doctor, an older woman with kind, weary eyes, reviewed their test results 2 weeks later. "Physically, you're both healthy," she said. "But Sometimes there's what we call unexplained infertility, stress, emotional trauma, mental strain. Valerie's lips tightened. Ethan knew she was thinking the same thing he was, about the child that never arrived. "What do we do?" he asked. "Relax, rest, work less, and love each other more." On the way home, they stayed silent. Each was drowning in their own thoughts, bitter ones. At home, Valerie went straight to the bedroom. Ethan stood in the kitchen, staring out the window. Outside, a little boy kicked a soccer ball while his mother called him in for dinner. A tiny picture of family life, painfully unreachable. Then Valerie called from the hallway. "Maybe we should go to the cabin this weekend." "Sure," he replied, though he knew they would sit in silence there too. The park project brought Ethan recognition. Journalists interviewed him. Colleagues shook his hand. Management hinted at a promotion. He should have been thrilled. Instead, he felt nothing. "Congratulations," Valerie said when he showed her a newspaper article with his photo. "You did well." The words were correct. The tone was cold, like she was praising a co-worker, not her husband. Valerie's career soared too. She was offered a position as chief financial officer at a large retail company. Her salary tripled. "Let's celebrate," Ethan suggested. "No need. I have an important meeting tomorrow. I need prepare." They ate dinner in silence. Valerie spoke about work in a dry, business-like manner. Ethan listened half-heartedly, trying to remember the last time she smiled, really smiled. The bedrooms became separate after Valerie started working late. "I don't want to wake you," she explained as she moved into the guest room. Ethan didn't protest. It was easier to fall asleep alone than next to someone who felt like a stranger. In October 2000, Valerie walked in holding a small orange fluff ball. "What's that?" Ethan asked, seeing the tiny kitten mewing inside a shoebox. Found him by the front entrance. Ginger had completely thawed something inside Valerie. For the first time in a long while, she spoke with warmth. "Maybe her owner dumped her," Valerie said, holding the kitten tight. "We can't keep a cat. Do you have allergies?" "No," Ethan said. "I don't have allergies." Valerie eased the tiny animal out of the shoebox and pressed it to her chest. "Look how small. She'll die out there without us." Ethan wanted to argue, but when he saw that long-forgotten look in her eyes, a tenderness he hadn't seen since the library, he stayed silent. They named the kitten Ginger. She turned out to be lively and affectionate, with big green eyes and a fluffy tail. Valerie fussed over her like a mother, buying toys, expensive food, and taking her to the vet. "You've spoiled her rotten," Ethan grumbled, but he quietly slipped Ginger bits of meat from his plate. Ginger didn't respect boundaries. Sometimes she slept at Ethan's feet. Sometimes she climbed up and purred on his chest until morning. She became the only creature in the house allowed to show affection openly. One evening, Ethan worked at home on a new design, while Valerie sat in the armchair, going through financial reports. Ginger lay on the rug between them, turning her green eyes from one to the other. "She looks at us like we're her parents," Valerie said suddenly. Ethan looked up. His wife smiled, the first real smile in a month. "Yeah," he agreed. "We make a good family." The smile faded from Valerie's face, and she returned to her papers. Ethan noticed her hands trembling. They didn't talk about how Ginger had filled the emptiness left by the lost child. They never admitted aloud that the orange fur ball had become their shared project, the only thing still tying them together. Ginger grew, and the couple's relationship increasingly resembled a business partnership. They discussed renovations, vacation plans, purchases, but never feelings, dreams, or hopes. Ethan stayed later at the firm, taking extra commissions. Home felt quiet and uncomfortable. Even Ginger couldn't drown out the ringing void between them. "We're turning into strangers," he said once, watching Valerie pack a suitcase for yet another business trip. "Don't be ridiculous," she replied without looking up. "We're a family." Only on paper they were a family. In reality, two tired, disillusioned people who were afraid to confess that they'd lost the most important thing. Ginger, purring in their empty apartment, kept the warmth that had once existed. But was one cat's love enough to save what was crumbling? Sometimes life gives you meetings at the worst possible moment, when your heart is locked and your soul is exhausted. Then someone appears who can change everything, and you must choose between duty and feeling. Ethan first noticed Ava Bennett the previous year while filing paperwork for a new project. Quiet and neat, about 28, with chestnut hair pulled into a strict bun and sad brown eyes. She worked in human resources and kept to herself. In February 2002, Ethan was walking down the firm's corridor after a meeting and heard soft sobbing. On the landing by the stairwell, Ava sat with a handkerchief pressed to her face, shoulders trembling. "Ava." Ethan sat on the windowsill beside her. She lifted eyes red from crying, tried to smile. "Sorry, Mr. Collins. I didn't mean—" "Work troubles?" he asked. "Tell me. Maybe I can help." "My mother passed away," she said quietly, and the tears came again. "Her funeral was yesterday. I came to work today because there's nobody else." Something tightened in Ethan's chest. He thought of his own mother, her warm hands, the smell of homemade pies. "Do you have any family?" he asked. "No, it was just my mom and me. My dad died when I was 5. Ava wiped her face, but couldn't stop crying. "I'm scared to be alone." Ethan pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her. "Come on," he said. "I'll walk you home. You shouldn't be alone today." "No, I have so much to do." "The paperwork can wait," she protested weakly. "Go home. Rest," he insisted. He walked her to the bus stop and helped her onto the bus. Ava squeezed his hand gratefully. "Thank you. You're very kind." At home, Ethan told Valerie what had happened. "Poor woman," Valerie said, still focused on computer. "At least she'll get good benefits." The coldness in her voice stabbed Ethan. When had Valerie become so hard? The next day, Ethan stopped by the HR office. Ava looked pale but was at work. "How are you?" he asked. "Want to grab coffee and talk?" "No, don't trouble yourself," she said. "But sometimes it's nice to have someone to talk to." They went to a small café near the firm. Ava ordered tea and barely touched the pastry. "My mother always said, 'Find a good person, get married, have kids,'" Ava whispered, stirring her tea. "I kept working, thinking I'd have time later. Now I'm alone. You're young. You're beautiful. You'll have a life," Ethan said, though he didn't entirely believe it. "Are you happy in your marriage?" Ava asked unexpectedly. The question knocked the air out of him. He hesitated, searching for words. "I've known my wife since college," he finally replied, which wasn't an answer. Ava listened without judgment, only with understanding. Ethan found himself opening up about architecture, about dreams and the way buildings shape lives. "Do you have dreams?" she asked gently. He smiled, a real smile, perhaps the first in a long time. "I want to build a real home, a place where a happy family lives. Children laughing, the scent of pies in the kitchen, people gathered around the table telling each other about their day." "That's a beautiful dream," Ava said softly. "Does your wife share it?" Ethan fell quiet. He realized Valerie hadn't asked about his projects, his dreams, or his plans for a long time. Their coffee meetings became regular. Ava talked about her mother, her loneliness, her fears. Ethan spoke about proportion and line, how architecture can change people's lives. She listened attentively, asked questions, and seemed to understand in a way that warmed something inside him. "Would you show me your sketches?" she asked one day. Ethan returned home with his portfolio of drawings. Ava slowly flipped to the pages of Ethan's sketchbook, admiring each drawing. "These houses are beautiful, but this one," she paused on a page, "this one feels special, so warm, so alive. It's a design for a big family home out of the city." Ethan explained quietly. "See this bay window? That would be the kids' room. And here, a big living room with fireplace. Do you and your wife have children?" Ava asked gently. "No," Ethan answered shortly. Ava didn't pry further, but he saw understanding and sympathy in her eyes. Spring 2003. Something shifted between them. Ava started coming to work looking more polished. Light makeup, new dresses, her bun looser, softer. And Ethan found himself waiting for their encounters with an eagerness that both scared and relieved him. One evening, while walking her home, he reached for her hand. Ava didn't pull away. "Ethan," she whispered. "Just, Ethan, I feel good with you." "I feel good with you too," he admitted. "But I'm a married man." "I know." She swallowed. "And I don't know what to do with my feelings." They stopped at the entrance of her apartment building. Ava looked up at him. "I'm not asking you for anything, but I love you, and if you decide to stay with me, I'll be happy." Ethan kissed her, softly, carefully, and felt something thaw inside his chest, something that hadn't warmed in years. The discovery. When he came home, he nearly bumped into Valerie in the hallway. She was holding his jacket, and a small piece of paper stuck out of the pocket. "What's this?" she asked, showing him the note. Ethan recognized Ava's handwriting instantly. "Thank you for tonight. I'll be waiting tomorrow. Same place." Valerie didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply handed him the jacket. "No explanations," she said calmly. "I'm not blind." They stood facing each other in the narrow hallway. Ginger rubbed against Ethan's legs, purring, unaware of the storm. "Are you angry?" Ethan asked quietly. "No." She shook her head. "Surprisingly, no. Probably because I felt for a long time that it was over between us." "Val," he began. "She understands you, doesn't she?" Valerie interrupted. "She listens when you talk about work. She cares about your dreams." Ethan remained silent. "I get it," Valerie said, her voice almost tender. "I know how lonely you felt next to me, and I know how lonely I felt next to you." "What do we do now?" he whispered. "Live," she replied. "For now, and then we'll see." She walked into her room, leaving Ethan standing in the hallway alone. Ginger meowed, asking for attention. Ethan picked her up and pressed her to his chest. "What do I do, girl?" he whispered. "What do I do?" Outside, spring was blooming, and with it, new love entered Ethan's life. But could happiness be built on the ruins of a marriage? And what price was he about to pay for the right to new feelings? October 2003, the news that changed everything. Rain hammered against the cafe windows when Ava said the words that turned Ethan's world upside down. "I'm pregnant." She said it quietly, not looking up from her cup of cold coffee. 3 months. Ethan froze as everything inside him flipped. A child. His child. With Ava. That's wonderful," he breathed, reaching for her hand. But she drew her hand back. "Wonderful." Ava's voice trembled with bitterness. "Ethan, I'm tired of waiting. I'm 29. I'm going to have a baby. And I still don't know if I have a future with the baby's father." "You know I love you," he said. "I do. But you're still living with your wife." Ava replied, finally lifting her eyes. In them, exhaustion, resolve. "I'm having this baby, with you or without you. But I won't wait anymore." Ethan stared at the raindrops sliding down the window. "Valerie, they're home. Ginger the cat. Over 10 years of life together. And Ava was the only light he'd seen in a long, dark tunnel. "Give me time to think," he said quietly. "1 week," Ava answered, standing. "In 1 week, I want your decision." The decision. At home, it was silent. Valerie hadn't returned from work yet. Ginger ran to the door, purring, brushing against Ethan's legs. He lifted the cat and sat in the armchair. "What do I do, girl?" he whispered into her fur. "What's the right thing to do?" An hour later, Valerie came home. She looked at him with a strange calm. "What happened?" "Ava's pregnant." Valerie slowly removed her coat, hung it neatly, returned to the living room, and sat across from him. "And now?" she asked. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "She wants a baby. She wants me to choose. Her or me?" Valerie finished for him. "And what do you want?" He looked at his wife, beautiful, successful, distant. When was the last time she smiled? When did they last laugh together? "I want to be a father," he said honestly. "I want my child to know me." Valerie nodded slightly, as if she had expected nothing else. Then the decision is made. The visit to his mother. That weekend, Ethan drove to see his mother. Mary welcomed him with warm pies and a worried expression. She understood instantly. "Tell me, son, what's the trouble?" Ethan told her everything about Ava, the pregnancy, and that he couldn't keep living with Valerie. "Son," Mary finally said, "do you remember the story about your father?" "What story?" "He wanted to marry another woman before me. Loved her very much. But she left him for someone richer. Later he married me. You were born. We lived well. But sometimes he looked out the window, and I knew who he was thinking about. You never told me that. There was no need. But now you must hear me. Don't repeat my mistake. I spent my whole life wishing I had let him go, let him find happiness with the one he truly loved." "Mom." "Go to your Ava," Mary said softly. "Have your children. Love them. Life's too short to waste it on something that no longer brings joy." The final step. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. Colonel Gregory Summers, Valerie's father, stood at the door with a briefcase in hand. "Hello, son-in-law," he said dryly. Valerie sent the documents. He placed a folder on the table. "Divorce by mutual consent. Sign it. Valerie is a good woman. She'll find a worthy man. You live however you think is right." Ethan opened the folder. Valerie had already signed everything. Her handwriting was neat, steady, no smudges, no hesitation. "She's moved out," the colonel added. "Took the cat too. Ginger. Who else? Couldn't leave her alone here." Ethan's hand trembled as he signed the papers. Colonel Gregory Summers took the documents and headed toward the door. "Gregory." Ethan called after him, "Please tell Valerie." "I'll tell her nothing," the colonel interrupted sharply. He stopped in the doorway. "What needed to be said, you should have said while you were still together." And then he left. The wedding. The wedding with Ava was quiet, small, only a handful of people. Mary came to bless the newlyweds. Ava was radiant in a simple white dress that hid her already noticeable baby bump. "We'll be happy," Ava whispered, hugging her new husband after the signing. "We will," Ethan replied, but a strange, heavy ache lived in his chest. Their son, Evan, was born in the spring of 2004, a strong, pink-cheeked baby with bright green eyes. Ethan held him for the first time and cried. Finally he had a child. "He looks like you." Ava smiled, exhausted but glowing. "He looks like Ginger." Ethan laughed, and immediately fell silent, realizing what he'd just said. Ginger, the cat he lost along with Valerie. A new life that still hurt. They moved into a new apartment. Ethan received a promotion. Ava was gentle, caring, attentive as a wife and a mother. But sometimes at night, rocking Evan to sleep, Ethan wondered how Valerie would look holding a baby, how her gray eyes would soften, how she would have laughed. The news that broke him. In spring 2005, a colleague casually mentioned something that nearly made Ethan drop his blueprints. "Hey, did you hear? Valerie Summers had a baby." "What?" Ethan froze. "Yeah, her. Your ex-wife. A boy. She's raising him alone. Won't say who the father is. Cute kid, they say." Valerie, the mother, the woman who once insisted she wasn't ready for children. Ethan walked for hours that evening, pushing Evan's stroller to the quiet streets, unable to process it. Valerie had become a mother. The wind carried the sound of children laughing on a playground. Evan peeked out of the stroller. "Daddy, why are you sad?" 3-year-old Evan asked. "I'm not sad, buddy. Just thinking." "About what?" "That life is complicated." At home, Ava was making dinner, humming softly. Their apartment was warm, cozy, filled with the smells of food and baby toys. Everything was good, but inside Ethan lived an unexplainable emptiness. "You heard about Valerie?" he asked suddenly. Ava froze, not turning around. "I heard. She had a son." "It's strange," Ethan murmured. "She never wanted kids." "People change," Ava said quietly. "But I don't like when you talk about her." "Sorry, I won't anymore." But that night, watching Ava sleep, Ethan thought of Valerie rocking her newborn. Was she happy? Did she still sing softly like she once did in college? And why did fate give them children only when they were already living in different families? Somewhere across Denver, a woman with gray eyes rocked a baby boy in her arms and whispered a lullaby. Maybe she too wondered how their story could have been different. Children, the echo of love. Children are what remain when love itself fades. They grow, laugh, ask questions, never knowing that their parents once dreamed of a completely different life. And parents look at them and think, this is real happiness. If only they realized it in time. Evan's childhood. Evan grew up curious and gifted. By age 5, he held a pencil like a pro. By 7, he was drawing basic geometric shapes. Ethan watched with pride as his son leaned over his paper, tongue sticking out in concentration. "Daddy, is this right?" Evan asked, showing a little house he'd drawn. "Almost, buddy. The roof just needs a little correction." "Look." Ethan guided his son's hand. "Architecture is music frozen in stone," Ethan said softly. "I don't get it," Evan admitted honestly. "But it sounds cool." Ethan laughed and kissed the top of his son's head. In those moments, he felt truly, genuinely happy. The marriage cracks. But with Ava, things were falling apart. She accused him of being distant, cold, more focused on work than home. "You were never fully with me," she said one night after Evan fell asleep. "Even in bed, I feel like you're thinking about someone else." "Ava, what are you talking about?" "Her," Ava whispered. "Your first wife. You've never truly loved me." Ethan wanted to deny it, but deep down he knew she was right. He cared for Ava. He respected her. But that overwhelming, all-consuming love he'd once had with Valerie, that was gone forever. "I'm trying to be a good husband," he whispered. "Trying," she repeated bitterly. "I need you to love me." The second divorce, 2010. The divorce in 2010 was quiet and civil. Evan stayed with Ava but spent every weekend with Ethan. Ethan rented a small 2-bedroom apartment near the architecture firm and set up a bright, cozy room just for his son. "Daddy, why don't you live with Mommy?" Evan asked at 6, lying in his new bed. "It just happened that way, buddy. But I love you very much. That never changes." "Mom cries sometimes," Evan whispered. "She thinks I don't see. But I see. Ethan's heart clenched. He never wanted to hurt Ava, but he couldn't live in a loveless marriage anymore. Valerie's life. Valerie built her own world. After giving birth to Daniel, she took a year off, then returned to work stronger than ever. She became CFO of a large international corporation, bought a beautiful 3-bedroom condo with huge windows and a park view. Daniel was healthy, bright, energetic, gray-eyed like his mother, stubborn like her too. "Mom, why don't I have a dad?" 5-year-old Daniel once asked. "You have me," Valerie said, hugging him. "You have Grandpa, and you have Ginger. Isn't that enough?" "It's enough," Daniel agreed. "But a kid in school said everybody needs a dad." "Families come in different shapes, sweetheart. What matters is love." Ginger, now a serious, chunky cat, became Daniel's best friend. He carried her everywhere, read to her, shared cookies with her. Ginger tolerated everything, purring and nuzzling him as if she belonged to him since birth. Because in a way, she did. Unexpected encounters. Ethan and Valerie ran into each other rarely, but every time it struck like a blow to the heart. The first time was in 2008 in Central Park. Valerie was pushing a little boy, Daniel, on the swings. "Higher, Mommy, higher." She laughed, her hair flying, her face alive. Ethan froze behind a tree. There she was, the girl from the library, alive, happy, glowing, and beside her, a boy with her eyes, her smile. Their son, no, her son, from another man. Pain sliced his chest. He turned away and walked off quickly, refusing to let himself imagine a life they might have had. 2012, the supermarket. The second meeting happened in 2012 in a supermarket. Ethan was picking up groceries with Evan for their weekend together when he heard a familiar voice. "Daniel, don't run. Grab a cart." He turned and saw Valerie. She looked even more beautiful. Success, motherhood, independence had given her a quiet, confident glow. Beside her stood a dark-haired 7-year-old boy, Daniel, practically her mirror. "Mom, can I get ice cream?" "You can, but only one, and only after lunch." "Yay!" Daniel sprinted toward the freezer aisle. Valerie spotted Ethan and stopped. For a few seconds, they just looked at each other in silence. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi. How are you?" she replied. "Working. Raising Evan. Things are fine." Valerie nodded toward the boy. "Meet Daniel." The little boy ran up holding a stuffed animal, studying the stranger with curious eyes. "This is Uncle Ethan," Valerie said. "We've known each other a long time," Ethan offered, kneeling to extend his hand. "Nice to meet you, Daniel." "Nice name," the boy said shyly. "Thanks." "Do you have kids?" Valerie asked. "Yes, Evan. He's a bit older than you." "Let's be friends," Daniel blurted out with the blunt honesty only a child has. Valerie and Ethan exchanged a look. "We should go," she said gently to Daniel. "Bye, Ethan." "Bye," he answered, watching them walk away. The boy turned at the corner and waved. Ethan waved back, feeling a lump in his throat. At home, he sat by the window for a long time, thinking about what he'd just seen. Valerie looked happy. She had a son, a career, a life. And what did he have? Work, rare weekends with Evan, an empty apartment. "Daddy, are you sad?" Evan asked when he came over to visit. "Just a little, buddy." Ethan hugged his son, remembering an old story. "Let's draw instead." "Okay, what shall we draw?" "A house. A big, beautiful house for a big family." "Who will live in it?" Evan asked. "I don't know yet. We'll draw and see." They sat at the table with colored pencils. Evan concentrated on the walls while Ethan helped with proportions. In his head echoed Daniel's childlike offer, Let's be friends. If only it were that simple. In another part of town, a woman tucked her son to sleep and thought of the same man she'd once loved, dreaming of a house, a family. Fate plays strange tricks. It separates people for years and then brings them back together through children who know nothing of their parents' past. Some meetings feel inevitable, like the changing seasons. Years later, a teenage Evan bursts into his father's apartment with the boundless energy of a 13-year-old. "Dad, meet my new friend. This is Daniel. He wants to be a doctor, but he really knows his way around architecture." Ethan looked up from his sketches and froze. In the doorway stood a tall boy with gray eyes and a familiar, even more familiar, smile. Daniel at 12, dark hair, defined features, Valerie in miniature. "Hello, Mr. Collins," Daniel said, offering his hand. "Evan talks about you all the time." "Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you, too," Ethan answered hoarsely as he shook the solid, confident hand. This was Valerie's son, her Daniel, the same boy from the supermarket who had offered to be friends years ago. "Daniel helps me with projects," Evan continued, oblivious to his father's shock. "He has interesting layout ideas. Dad, you should hear him out." "Oh, come on." Daniel waved it off, embarrassed. "I've just loved drawing houses since I was little. I read a lot about architecture." "Your mom," Ethan started, then stopped. "Sorry, you just remind me of someone." Daniel smiled, and that smile was all of Valerie. "My mom says I get it from her. Same stubborn streak, too." Ethan turned to the window to hide his sudden emotion. Valerie's son was friends with Evan. "Fate, Dad, we're in a room to look at the project." Evan said, "Maybe later we can all have dinner?" "Sure," Ethan agreed, still stunned. The boys went to the playroom, leaving Ethan alone with a swarm of thoughts. He watched Daniel carefully during dinner as the boy talked about school, wanting to be a doctor, and his proud mother who was respected at work, but soft and loving at home. "She's the best mom," Daniel said with childlike pride. "Everyone at her job respects her, but at home she's different. She's kind and caring. She adores our cat." "Our cat," Ethan repeated. "Yeah, Ginger. We've had him 12 years now. He's old but handsome. Mom found him as a kitten. She said she couldn't just walk past him." Ethan's heart dropped. Ginger, their Ginger, was alive, well, living with Valerie. He wandered the apartment until he found his old phone, the one he hadn't called in years, and dialed. "Hello." A familiar voice answered after the third ring. "Valerie, it's Ethan. We need to talk." A long, heavy pause. "About what?" "Our sons. They're friends. Maybe we should meet." "Okay," she said softly. "Tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Remember the café on Maple Street?" He remembered. The same little café where they'd once had their first dates, that first kiss, where they'd mapped out a future. "I remember. See you then." The café hadn't changed much in 20 years. Same tables, same smell of coffee and fresh pastries. Valerie sat by the window in the same corner, where they'd once talked for hours about dreams. She'd aged gracefully, a strand of silver at her temple, faint lines at the corners of her eyes, but her posture was straight and her gaze steady. A successful, fulfilled woman. "Hi," Ethan said as he sat down. "Hi. You haven't changed much." "You look even better," he answered. "Don't give me compliments, Ethan. We're not children anymore." "No, we're not." "Valerie, our sons became friends. Daniel's helping Evan with the senior project." "I know. Daniel talks about your son. He says Evan's talented, like his friend Daniel." "He speaks highly of you," Ethan said. "You raise him well." "I raise him on my own," Valerie replied simply, no bitterness, just fact. "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered, "for everything. For leaving, for not being there when you gave birth." Don't. She cut in. We both made mistakes. What did you do wrong? He asked. For locking myself in after that. For not forgiving you. For the forced wedding and the grief we carried. You wanted a child, and I was terrified of responsibility. Ethan reached across the table and covered her hand with his. We were young and foolish. Yes, she said, and we paid dearly. Valerie didn't pull her hand away. You know, she said softly, sometimes I wonder, what if back in '96 we had tried to fix things? Talked honestly, gone to therapy. But people didn't do that back then. Everyone just stayed silent, endured. Yeah, Ethan nodded. And now we each have our own lives, our own kids. Val, Ethan squeezed her hand gently. Can I see him? Daniel, not as Evan's friend, as your son, the child you raised. Valerie looked out the window for a long time. Come on Saturday, she said at last. For lunch, if you want. Saturday. Ethan stood in front of a familiar apartment building with flowers and a box of chocolates, feeling like a college kid on a first date. Valerie opened the door herself. Casual clothes, jeans, a sweater, warm, familiar, beautiful as ever. Come in, she said. Daniel's cooking something in the kitchen. The apartment was bright, cozy, filled with sunlight, flowers on every windowsill. Pictures on the walls, Valerie and her son through the years, Daniel with awards and certificates. Mom. Who? Daniel stepped out of the kitchen, then smiled. Oh, Mr. Collins. Evan said you might come. Hey, Daniel. Ethan shook his hand firmly. How's your project coming? Great. Evan's been a huge help. Suddenly something orange flashed in the hallway. Ethan turned and froze. A big, fluffy, graying ginger cat stepped into view. Ginger. There, Ginger. The cat hesitated only a few seconds, then slowly approached Ethan. Ginger. Ethan whispered, kneeling down. The cat sniffed his hand, then began to purr. Loudly, warmly, he pushed his head against Ethan's palm, then against his knee, purring even louder. That's strange, Valerie said, surprised. He usually hides from strangers. Ethan stroked the cat with trembling hands. He remembers me, Ethan whispered. My God, he remembers me. Valerie watched them, the man and the old cat reunited after so many years, and tears filled her eyes. Daniel looked confused, but sensed something important was happening. Love is the one force strong enough to bend time, to give second chances to those who truly deserve them. A slow return. After the day with Ginger, something shifted between Ethan and Valerie. They began seeing each other more often. First because of their sons, then simply because being together felt right again. They were careful, gentle with each other, as if walking on thin ice. Ethan came for family dinners, helped Daniel choose a topic for his thesis, talked about his new projects. Valerie listened, really listened, like she once did in college. And Ginger, now nearly white with age, curled up between them on the couch, purring as if blessing their fragile reconciliation. Mom, why is Mr. Collins here so often? Daniel asked one day. We're old friends, she said, not ready to say more. Okay, Daniel shrugged. I like him. Evan's lucky to have him. 2017, the miracle. In the fall of 2017, Valerie felt unusually tired. She blamed work, stress, lack of sleep. When the symptoms didn't go away, she finally went to the doctor. The results stunned her. Congratulations, the gynecologist said gently. You're pregnant. About 6 weeks. That's impossible, Valerie whispered. I'm 51. Rare, the doctor said, but possible. You'll need close monitoring. Your age makes this a high-risk pregnancy. Valerie left the clinic in a daze. pregnant at 51 with Ethan's child. After everything, life was giving them another chance to become parents together. But fear outweighed joy. Her age, her health. What would Daniel think? Evan? And Ethan, what would he say? When she got home, pale and shaken, Daniel was studying, Ginger sleeping on the windowsill. An ordinary evening, about to change forever. The confession. Ethan arrived an hour later for their usual dinner. Valerie, are you okay? You look. Sit down, Ethan. We have to talk. He took her hands. They trembled. What's wrong? I'm pregnant. She blurted it out, then shut her eyes, bracing for any reaction except the one that followed. Ethan said nothing for so long that she finally opened her eyes. Tears streamed down his cheeks. Is it true? He whispered. Is it really true? 6 weeks. Ethan stood, came to her, knelt at her feet, hugged her tightly. Val, this is a miracle. A real miracle. I'm 51, Ethan. It's dangerous. We'll get the best doctors, the best care. We'll do everything. And if something goes wrong, it won't, he said firmly, because this is our baby, our child, ours. They cried and held each other, overwhelmed. Ginger waddled over, brushing against their legs as if sensing the moment. What's happening? Daniel asked from the doorway. Valerie, and Ethan looked up at him. Come here, honey, Valerie said softly. We have news. Daniel listened without interrupting, then fell silent, thinking. So, I'm going to have a baby brother or sister? He finally asked. Yes, Valerie said nervously. If you're okay with that. Why wouldn't I be? Daniel blinked. That's amazing. And now it makes sense why you two look at each other like you're in love. Valerie blushed. Ethan laughed. Smart kid you've got, he said. Our kid, Valerie corrected gently. Family reactions. The next day, Ethan visited his mother. 77 now, but lively as ever. Mary listened in surprise, then delight. In our family, women had babies in their 50s, she said confidently. My grandmother had her last at 52. This is nothing. Love matters more than age. Mom, don't you think we're too old for all this? Nonsense, she waved him off. Love has no age. Happiness has no age. Telling Evan was harder. Ethan and Valerie invited both boys for dinner. We have news, Ethan said. Valerie is pregnant. Evan choked on his juice. Wait, Dad, seriously? Very seriously. But how? Valerie began softly, trying to start over, if you boys don't mind. Evan and Daniel exchanged a glance. So we're brothers now? Evan asked. Half brothers, Daniel corrected. And soon we'll have a baby sibling. Awesome, Evan exclaimed unexpectedly. I always wanted a big family. One last blessing. The last person they told was Colonel Gregory Summers. Valerie visited him one evening, sat beside him on the couch. Dad, I have news, she said. I'm pregnant, and Ethan and I are getting married again. The 80-year-old colonel stared out the window for a long moment. At last, he said finally, my grandsons will finally be official brothers, and soon there'll be one more. You're not angry? Angry. He pulled his daughter into a hug. For what? That my daughter's happy. That at 80 I get to be a grandpa again? Don't be silly. New Year's Eve, 2018. They celebrated New Year's together in Valerie's apartment, now officially their shared home. Ethan had moved in after their small courthouse wedding in November. Valerie, glowing and calm, was 5 months pregnant. The doctors said everything looked perfect. Around the table sat their big blended family. Ethan and Valerie, Daniel and Evan, Mary, Colonel Summers. And under the table, Ginger, old, wise, purring softly, a witness to all these years. Make a wish, Valerie said, raising her glass of juice. I already have everything I wished for, Ethan replied, looking at his wife, his boys, and the cat who had lived through their entire story. I have a real family now. A big, loving one. And soon it'll get even bigger, Daniel added, touching Valerie's belly gently. Outside, snow fell quietly. Inside, there was warmth, hope, and the belief that the best roads are the ones that lead us home. And beneath Valerie's heart beat a new life, a symbol of second chances, forgiveness, and the truth that real love is stronger than time, mistakes, or distance. Some stories end exactly when it seems everything is lost, because that's when destiny finally brings people home.